I think, yeah, maybe, do we want to give it maybe one more minute just to let people jump on? And then I think we're good to go.
All right.
So far, we've only got a couple people, it looks like. Melissa, I just got an email from Andy that he will not be able to join.
I didn't see on the RSVPs, I didn't see any no's, just some tentatives, but it seemed like there were plenty of yeses. So
Okay.
might just, maybe folks are grabbing some lunch or something, might just give it another couple minutes if you can spare it on the agenda, Jared.
Sounds good. Well, it might be a smaller group today.
The classic Friday before a 3-day weekend.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. Well, it's almost 5 after. I wonder if we want to take roll and then maybe we can make some decisions, or Erica, I'll kick it to you to just sort of start off, and then I wonder if we'll have enough people to really have some discussion, but
Okay. Well, welcome to the Youth Development Council's Equity and Disparity Committee meeting. I'm Erica McAlpin, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Melissa, would you like to go ahead with the roll call?
Thank you, Erica. Zan Ojero, Janine Hartley, Celeste Jansen.
Here.
Robin Johnson, Andy Leonard, Erica McAlpin, Christina McMahon, Jeff Parker, Andy Santana May, Koi Vu. And that's it. Thank you.
okay. Well, Brian, I'm wondering if you have any suggestions. Do you think because we don't have quorum, I don't know if we need quorum to really make
We don't.
some
Keep going.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Celeste. Thank you, Erica. We march on. It is,
Okay.
Melissa and I will try to text some of the people to see if we can't get some more folks to show, but it is what it is. So, and we don't formally vote on things, so we don't need a quorum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, with that, I think next on the agenda was Brian, if you want to kick us off a little bit with that, with the land acknowledgement discussion.
I am happy to. Thank you, Jared. Thank you again, Erica, for chairing this. Celeste, appreciate you also being here. So I think Celeste was on the executive committee meeting earlier this week. Am I right? No, Celeste, no. Maybe I just was like hoping you were there. And I don't, that is not like some passive aggressive weird thing. Somehow I thought I saw you. But so one of the conversations we had at that committee meeting, Erica, were you there? Okay, see, now I'm just like, who, maybe it was just a meeting in my dream. Oh, Melissa, you were there, so it did actually happen. One of the topics we brought up was that at a recent meeting, government to government tribal prevention cluster meeting, which Anya Sakino from our staff attends on a, let's say, quarterly basis, there was a discussion about land acknowledgements. And in that discussion, a few tribal members and folks who were on that meeting said, these land acknowledgements are really problematic. They're re-traumatizing, and from the perspective of, I think, 2 or 3 of the tribes, it's like you're talking about genocide, and it didn't feel, it felt performative, and it felt like there was not a lot of like commitment behind it. Others in the meeting, other tribal members and leaders, said that they appreciated the land acknowledgements, thought that there was value in at least remembering and recalling the history of genocide and land theft and current and continued oppression. And so again, I wasn't in that meeting, but Anya was. And so it was just, I think, a healthy debate about the topic. And I'm not saying that I have an answer, but I felt like it was an opportunity for us to have a little pause and just see if there were any reflections in this meeting, particularly since we're talking about equity and equity issues. And the other thing I'll say, 2 other things I'll say, is that the Legislative Committee on Indian Services, which is a state of Oregon body, has recommended, I think, sort of after that meeting, that 8 state agencies at least take a pause and halt on doing land acknowledgements until after they have a meeting. I think they have a meeting in June, in which I think the idea may be that all 9 of the federally recognized tribes can have a deeper conversation and provide some clear guidance, because from that meeting it wasn't clear which way to go, but it was more like, hey, let's take a pause, and their recommendation is to halt until they've had a chance to have a conversation. And again, who knows what will happen. In our executive committee meeting, Robin Johnson, our chair, heard the same information I've just provided you, and she said, there are multiple viewpoints and angles on this thing. I think the general sense was, let's take a pause, but let's ask a question. Let's actually sort of give some information back. So I've composed an email that I'm about to send to the relatively new executive director of the the LCIS, Legislative Commission on Indian Affairs, Patrick Flanagan, and basically say, hey, we're aware of this conversation. What would it look like if for us as an agency if we actually articulated the things that we're doing, like not so much reflecting all, I mean, we can talk about the history and that's important, but also we've got some pretty specific things that we're doing as an agency, and have a piece in our strategic plan around building relationships with tribal nations and understanding and upholding tribal sovereignty. So I think we at a strategic plan level have said this is important to us, and we're doing, you know, I have a list of things that I was going to send to Patrick about, like removing language from our documents and grant agreements around asking tribal nations to waive tribal sovereignty. We included a score multiplier in our competitive application process to ensure that we'd have awards to some of the 9 federally recognized tribes. We have 3 current grantees. We administer the JCP, Juvenile Crime Prevention Funds, and that's an important kind of piece of our portfolio. We had a staff who attended the Cow Creek Tribal Youth Summit. And that's not to say that we're all special and we've got it figured out, but I think we've got some real specific things we're doing. And it may be good to both acknowledge and to say, hey, like, this is important to us. So I'm going to try to engage a conversation with Patrick. Would love your feedback, questions, etc.
So this is something that I had just finished working on for OSU Cascades, and it is very difficult to prepare a land acknowledgement that all the tribes will agree on. You can get input from 1 or 2 and they like it, but then someone else doesn't like it. And so I think going to Patrick and getting their advice is the best way to approach this. And then at least you have that, right? If someone else comes along and says, well, we don't like your land acknowledgement, you can say, well, we have a stamp of approval from this organization. I think we run into problems when, because even when I had one prepared that was approved, and my white colleagues started trying to pick it apart. And now I think we make a mistake of thinking that the land acknowledgement is for us, when it's not for us. It's for the people that were harmed, for our Indigenous community members, right? So I think that what you're doing is the absolute best route to take.
Appreciate that, Erica. And Celeste, interested in if you have any thoughts or things. I'll say really quickly, Erica, and maybe just as like a little bit of quick context, the land acknowledgement that we've read at meetings in the past, and you all have heard this, Jared actually had it like ready to for us to go read, and Erica, you saw it, I saw it. We one of our staff, 2 of our staff, Jared and Sanjay, who's now at another agency, actually worked on it, connected with one of our council members, Andy Leonard, who's a member of the Warm Springs tribe, and he had a chance to kind of just support us and be with us in that process. And we ultimately, I believe, took some language that the Oregon Department of Education Office on Indian Education had developed, and sort of had that had feedback from various tribal members, and I think among them were the 9 federally recognized tribes. So we had, I think, a good process for the land acknowledgement itself. So I'll just say that. I don't know, Celeste.
I appreciate the pause. I also agree. I think this plan sounds really good. I've heard lots of differing opinions, and I think, like all things, that will always be the case. I'm really excited to find out what happens at the upcoming meeting, and I do feel like if there is a solution that ultimately the tribes agree upon, I really think it's important for us in a government to government experience and relationship to work with them and be led by them. So it sounds like, Brian, there is something coming up in the near future where this is going to be discussed.
That's what I understand from Patrick Flanagan. Andy,
Hi,
I
Andy.
see you having joined our committee meeting. Really appreciate your being here. We're just talking about, I think, kind of our first agenda item about the land acknowledgement and the Legislative Committee on Indian Affairs and their recent recommendation to have agencies stop doing land acknowledgements until there's a deeper discussion that I think at their upcoming June meeting. And we were just talking about some of the backstory, which you were a part of a bit with Sanji and Jared, and just appreciate your being here. And I, in short, I'm going to reach out to Patrick and just sort of engage him a little bit in a conversation about like kind of where we are as an agency. I don't know if you're just jumping in, so I don't want to, not trying to put you on the spot. We just appreciate having you here. And if you have any thoughts or questions, please jump in.
I don't actually, because I know I just read the description of the beginning of the meeting. Yeah, I have.
No worries, Andy.
Yeah,
no pressure.
I've been waiting for this discussion. Maybe kind of go over that with you guys too.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right, Jared.
Okay, thank you all. Let's see. Erica, I don't want to step on your toes. I don't know if you wanted to say anything before we move on to the next agenda item.
No.
As committee chair. Okay, great. I will share my screen. Next, we've got a review of potential purpose statements. So let me just share that one moment. Okay.
I will ask a follow-up question. Brian, you will report back in our next meeting and let us know the outcome of that conversation that's going to take place.
Yes, Erica, great question. And I hope that maybe before our June quarterly meeting, I'll at least have heard back from Patrick, and maybe he and I can get on the phone or something. But yeah, so not only for this committee, but just for the whole YDC, yeah, I'll bring you whatever information I get.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, is everyone able to see the PowerPoint here with the purpose statement slide? Great. Okay, and I'm not going to project it into full presentation mode because I do want to be able to make some edits in case. But anyway, you'll recall last meeting in the discussion with Sanji, just talking about, really the purpose of this committee and scope of the committee. She sent an email as a follow-up afterwards with some bulleted items about committee purpose. And so we wanted to pull that all together into one cohesive statement that we can say, this is our statement as the Equity and Disparity Committee for what we support and what we are looking to do. So we took some of those bullets and we just pulled them into two potential purpose statements. You'll see each one has the same first sentence, and then it changes a little bit. And so we just wanted to present these two statements to the committee, see if anyone has any strong inclination toward one or the other, any feedback, any changes, and then hopefully we can decide on one statement that is really the scope and the purpose of this committee. So I will just give you a couple minutes to read over these purpose statements, and then I'll open it up for discussion.
On the first one, I noticed tribal membership, maybe tribal enrollment would be something. That's what they usually do with tribes, because you're enrolled into a tribe with your ID, everything with the tribe that you're from. That might be a difference right there, or you could say tribal affiliation too. So,
okay, perfect. Yeah, preference either way.
In enrollment, then you can keep affiliation at the end too. So,
okay, great. Can we say enrollment or affiliation?
oh yeah, or affiliation, that might be good too. Because I didn't want to put it twice. you don't want to put it on there twice or
Hmm.
tribal enrollment or affiliation.
Perfect, thank you.
Jared, you should probably add race and or slash ethnicity or race and ethnicity or something
Where?
after race.
Oh, gotcha.
You know,
Oops.
I mean, these things can be like a list, the forever list. So
And that's what I was just thinking.
Yeah.
I like number 2 because the list isn't there, and I'm afraid that we will miss someone or a group if we list them all out. And in number 2, it's a broader grouping. Does that make sense?
I think that makes great sense. Yep.
me too.
Because I was looking at gender and then sexual gender identity. It gets a bit
It's a lot.
convoluted. And if we try to list every single possible group, it'll be so long, you know, and I don't want to miss anybody.
Mhm.
I think the identity or background kind of says it all too in the second one,
Right, I agree.
regardless of identity and background.
I really
Like-
like the second one too, because the first one, I think, just says we're ensuring that everyone can succeed, which is a wonderful sentiment, but the how really matters. And I almost see that as being kind of like equity versus equality in some ways, where the first one just like, we want everyone to exceed. But I really like that the second one says that we're focused on identifying, addressing, and eliminating disparities and inequity. And I think it's important to say that. So the second one to me just speaks to me a lot more than the first one.
Great. All right. It sounds like we've got some consensus. Now, did I hear somebody else jump on? I just can't see who is as I'm sharing my screen.
Jared, I think I see Kiwi
Okay.
yeah, on. Hello, Kiwi. We don't see you, but we see you.
Hello, how you guys doing?
Doing well. How are you? Kiwi, do you have anything that you'd like to add on preference for purpose statement for the committee?
No, not right now. I'm just catching up with everything.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we're leaning toward number 2. Is there any wording change that you think is needed, or are you happy with the text as is?
Hey, Jared. One of the things that I think we were talking about, and it feels, I think, particularly relevant to this committee, but it also probably has relevance for other committees, is while we don't, I think, need to vote on things, and we're often, you know, it says right in the statement, like making recommendations to the broader council. One of the methods of like sort of getting a sense of people's of a consensus around an issue is a fist to 5 method. And I don't know, Celeste, I think you have some experience with this. Others, Erica, Andy, maybe I'll do. Like, I'm not gonna pretend to be an expert. But it may be some, I'd love to see our committees incorporate some of incorporate that method specifically. Because I think it is a good way for us to then answer the question I think you're asking us, Jared. Like, it's like, where are people at with this? Like, is it, and somebody else, maybe Erica or Celeste, somebody might have to help me define what 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Actually, I know there's resources online and et cetera, but like in a short, fist to 5 is a way for us to get it, as I said, get a sense of where people are. Like, I'm a 5, I'm in, I can advocate for support for this. 4 is, yeah, I'm in. I might have a question or two, but I have no reason to hold this back, and I'm going to stop defining them. I don't know. I mean, Erica or Celeste, do y'all have thoughts about that method?
It's my favorite way to really get the difference between I agree, this sounds good, or like, yes, this is the right thing. And I think when you're doing group work, sometimes if everyone kind of passively is like, oh yeah, I'm okay with it, it doesn't have the same umph as like, yes, this really, I can champion it. So I really like it. I know in the fist to 5, usually if someone's a 0 or a 1 or a 2, that's also like, there's serious considerations that we need to pause and talk through. And how we determine to handle 3s, we want to make set some norms around too. If, does that mean stop conversation? Or maybe someone also just says, I'm really new to this and I don't really have an opinion, so I'm okay with a 3.
I like that.
So this is my first time hearing of this method, but I like it. So I'm used to voting all the time. So I think, yeah, it sounds good. Everyone's been pretty quiet though, when Jared asked if there were any changes or questions. So Celeste, do you want to go ahead and run through that method? And that way I can see it in action.
Sure, yeah. I also love this method too, because it was designed by a group of youth leaders. It was like, I think the American Youth Policy Forum that came up with this method. So I also think it's a nice method. So if there are no other edits to it, if we want to vote on adoption by looking at the purpose statement and considering where each of us individually sit, with the idea that if it's a walk out the door, that's a 0. If it's a strongly champion, it's a 5. And you're welcome to put yourself anywhere on the continuum that feels right to you, with the idea that a 0 is kind of an actively fight it. A 5, oh, thank you, Brian. It looks like he put a glossary in the chat that has the definitions. Perfect, yes. So if everyone will take a look at the fist to 5 and determine where you are, and then in just a moment, we will go ahead and share our, where we're each at on adopting purpose statement 2. All right, I think maybe we've had enough time, so please go ahead and let's just show where we're at.
Put your hand up.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Wonderful. I think
We couldn't see Kiwi. Is Kiwi gone? Can't tell. Oh, there's Kiwi. We want to know if you're where you are on the fist to 5. I know your camera's off, which is all good, but can you tell us?
Or put it in the chat even.
Yeah.
What
Good
did
idea,
you
Melissa.
type? Whichever is easiest.
And maybe Kiwi's like got multiple things going on. So
Right now, I was trying to type in the chat technical difficulties, but it's not even letting me type. It's not even letting me click on my video right now. But yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Sorry, TV.
That's okay, Kiwi. We were just doing. Were you listening in on the fist to 5 conversation?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. Essentially, we're rating on a scale of 1 to 5 your comfort level in endorsing purpose statement number 2. 5 is I'm really into this. I'm ready to accept this and champion it. 0 is nope. Let's stop. 3 is sort of middle of the road. Do you have a sense of where you would be?
I mean, just by scanning through it real quick, I'd like the second one, really.
Great. All right. Do you want to give it an official rating, or are you just comfortable moving forward as is?
I mean, I don't really want to give it an official rating because, I don't want that this is people's work. I don't want to just like give it a rating where I haven't even like actually tried to put a lot of effort into it. Like I'm just now paying attention because we're trying to figure something out. So me reading it, just scanning through real quick, I just like number 2 best, but I don't know what rating I would give it.
Okay. All right. That sounds
fine.
good. Well, it sounds like everybody else I think that I saw gave it 5. So I think we are good to accept that as the committee purpose statement and move on. Any final words before we move on to the next topic? Wonderful. All right. Thank you all. And I love that we used a method that is youth developed. That's fantastic. Okay. So next, we wanted to continue the conversation from last time about equity. And I know last time we worked on defining equity and what equity means to you. We this time really want to do something similar. We have a purpose statement. We also want to create an equity statement or an equity definition, or what equity means to us. And so we have some discussion questions here, but before those discussion questions, we wanted to show a quick video on a concept called targeted universalism. And actually, before we show that, I'll just ask, is anyone familiar with the concept of targeted universalism? Sort of so, yeah. Great.
I would love some more information because I have heard it, but I'm not sure that it would be helpful to hear a refresher because I'm not quite sure that I have it right.
Perfect. Well, that's why we have a video. And Melissa, are you set to share that video, or should I pull it up here?
I am good to go.
Okay.
To me, it looks like my connection might be a little bit laggy, so just interrupt the video if it's not working from my end.
Great.
What is the most effective and sustainable policy response to problems in our society?
Universal approaches are widely used in order to package policies for broad approval. Universal policies such as Social Security and minimum wage provide the same benefits or minimum protections to everyone, regardless of status or group membership. But by treating everyone the same, universal approaches can't root out group-based discrimination and may actually deepen inequality between groups rather than reduce it. And by providing benefits or protections to everyone, resources that could be targeted to groups worse off instead flow to those who are better off. In contrast to universalism, targeted approaches are commonly used. Targeted policies provide benefits or protections based on group membership or status. SNAP, the food stamp program, conditions benefits on income level. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires public accessibility for disabled groups. And affirmative action focuses on historically disadvantaged groups. Targeted approaches are vulnerable to the critique that they unfairly favor constituent groups over the public good by directing resources to marginalized groups who are already subjected to unfair stereotypes. But universal and targeted approaches are false choices. There is a third way, targeted universalism. Targeted universalism means setting universal goals that can be achieved through targeted approaches. This approach targets the various needs of each group while reminding us that we are all part of the same social fabric. This can be accomplished by following 5 steps. First, set a universal goal. For example, 100% proficiency in 8th grade math. Second, measure how the overall population fares relative to the universal goal. In this example, we might discover that only 80% of 8th graders are proficient in 8th grade math. Third, measure the performance of population segments relative to the universal goal. So although 80% of all 8th graders are proficient, we might find that only 70% of Latinx students are proficient. Fourth, understand how structures and other factors support or impede groups' progress toward the universal goal. For our Latinx students, classroom instruction materials and lessons designed for English speakers may impede learning, including math proficiency. Finally, implement targeted strategies so that each and every group can achieve the universal goal based upon their needs and circumstances. This may take the form of ESL-specific math tutoring for our Latinx students, while another group may require a completely different strategy to achieve the same universal goal. Targeted universalism rejects a blanket universal, which may be indifferent to the reality that different groups are situated differently relative to the institutions and resources of society. By aspiring toward shared universal goals, targeted universalism empowers targeted strategies capable of achieving those goals while moving us beyond concerns over disparities alone and toward our highest aspirations for all.
Thanks, Melissa. Okay, so that's your refresher on targeted universalism. I'll share my
I've
screen.
got my
again.
essay written, and I've been working on it for about a week.
Okay. Perfect. So we don't necessarily have to go in order of these questions, but we've got, how can we be intentional with focusing our efforts on racial equity? How can we think about the intersectionality of other identities with race and ethnicity? And how do we apply these concepts to different areas of the state, thinking about what equity means in the Portland metro area versus, in Wallowa, for instance, or how do we think about this holistically? And so I'll just open it up to answer any of these questions, have a discussion about what we want our equity statement to look like, and how we move forward with that.
So I have so many thoughts because we are using targeted universalism. Is a new maybe term, right, for what's already out there, and academics tend to do this all the time, renaming terms that already exist, because I was familiar with universalism being utilitarianism, right? And so when we think about equity, we are already doing what targeted in society. I don't mean we as the Youth Development Council, but as a society are already doing this, but it's failing because of systemic barriers, right? And so I think our focus on racial equity and then intersectionality needs to be on how are we impacting those systemic barriers that impact young people, the population that we are trying to serve.
Great. Totally agree. Did I just see a hand?
Yeah, mine. I wanted to say, because like intentionally focusing on race, like equity and stuff like that, it's like more like Like I talk about this all the time. So like to make it equal, we don't even like know. I'm African American, right? A lot of time growing up, I always told myself, no, I'm not African. I don't want to be African. Like they're different. They smell different. They look different, right? So growing up, but that's what we got taught in school. That's what we got told. You know, African American or just being black. But we never got told that until I got older, black is just a color. Black is not a race at all. So like to begin with, really we gotta figure out our race, period. Because if we are black, we go to Africa right now talking about we're black, they're going about we're black too. So exactly what race are we? And then from there, we figure out what race we are, and then we can find equal between the within the race. But until we find out what race we are, it's just always gonna be clashing, whether it's with white or with black. Black people fight against each other too. We look at each other all the time like we're a different race. Like we don't like Africans. When we see Africans, we be like, okay, you guys are Africans, so we are American, we are black, even though we are the same, that we are the same race. So there's always gonna be fights in between races and stuff like that until we figure out what race that we are. And then once we figure that out, then everybody can be equal.
I think too, when we think about the construct of race and why race was created, it was for the purpose of slavery, to buy and sell people based on their skin color and their color. That's why races are typically colors. But if we think ethnicity, African American or Caucasian, those are ethnicities. So do we want to change what we're calling racial equity, to Kiwi's point?
I think that's a good discussion and decision for the group.
And like that, like you said, yeah, absolutely right. The ethnicity, that's what the African American fall under, and that's where a lot of us, we choose not to fall under that category, because if you say African American, we choose like to call ourselves like black, meaning like it's different from African American, because we can't take anyone's skin color from them, but we are, even if we got the same skin color, we are totally from different, like totally different streets, totally different like whole community. So we look at it as like, okay, yeah, we might have the same skin color, but you are mostly African American because you eat the American, you eat American food. The way you talk is the American way. You know, the way you do stuff is the American way. And then you got the African culture, which is the way they dance, the food they eat is very different from the food that black people eat, and it's very different from the food that Americans eat, which is white and black people. Because American is just a continent. We're Africans, but we're born in America, so America is really the culture. So when you talk about ethnicity, that's what the culture come in as. So that's why younger guys like me and my generation, we call ourselves black, because we do sag our pants. But other people look at it as like, okay, that's a bad way. That's where the gangsters, that's what the thugs do. But nah, that's something we use in a positive way now. That's just the fashion. That's why we dress. The N-word. A lot of times when older folks hear the N-word, they say, okay, that's a negative way because it means ignorant. No, we're using the term of endearment in our generation. So that's where the ethnicity comes in as like the way we talk with the stuff we eat and stuff like that. So there's a difference to me between African American, between black and between white, even if we're all in America. That's where the race needs to come in as, yes, we're all the same skin color, but we do different things. We talk different. So like, what race am I then? What is my ethnicity? Because black is my color. And race is my color too. But what's my culture? Because my culture is not African American. I don't eat American food. My culture is mostly like what black people do. But when we say black people, we're all our black people. So that's where we're confused at as a culture altogether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some great points. Anybody else? So would it be too simplistic to change racial equity here to ethnic equity? Is that sort of what I'm hearing? Or would you like to word it?
I think we have to be careful too, and use terms that people understand. Because if we keep changing the definition on folks will get confused. And we want the general public to be able to read, what our definition of equity is and understand it without needing subtext or additional bullet points, for people to read. So we do have to keep it simple, but making sure that we as a group understand what we're saying when we use these terms.
Absolutely.
We might understand like race, the difference between race and like ethnicity, like other people when they are reading this, like me, I just figured out what race and ethnicity was last year by me looking up on Google, like the difference, right? A lot of people, when they do read this, they might not even know the difference between race and ethnicity. To them, it might even mean the same thing.
Right. And, you know, just because, you know, I think this way, what's interesting to me is, and listening to Kiwi talk about being African-American versus being Black, I call myself Black as well. And it's because with any other group, like Asian Americans, those are usually Asian people that come from another country and get American citizenship, you know, but it's the same with Mexican Americans or Haitian American or Italian American, right? But for Black people, we all have been labeled African American simply by our existence in this country when I was born and raised right here in the United States. Just something to think about, and how we use this term of race and ethnicity, these terms.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, one of the things I think I'm hearing is, and you know, I think as an agency, particularly with our grant funding and policy work, we place I think a really great deal of the right appropriate level, whatever, of energy on like programs and practices that are culturally responsive and culturally appropriate. Responsive, appropriate, right? The word changes a little bit. And it's I kind of hear Kiwi talking about that, the importance of culture and recognition of culture, which is a little bit more that ethnicity piece. So I think, I'm not sure we need to change anything in our purpose statement per se, Jared, maybe not, but that focus, which I believe is something as an agency we have taken seriously, but as a committee that like focus on culturally specific, culturally appropriate, and or I think I hear this at times from the work we do with the 9 federally recognized tribes around like traditional practices, that's an area of like importance and focus. But I'm also hearing this thing from Erica around like system and systemic barriers. I think that the purpose statement kind of speaks to that, but it's an interesting place for us. Then can we do both? Should we be focused on like supporting, funding those culturally, let's say responsive, culturally and traditionally responsive services and practices, and addressing the systemic pieces? I think we're able to kind of do both, but we should make sure we're doing them like in concert or in collaboration or in some level of coordination. And in fact, one might say, given our grant making, we probably support quite a few, and maybe there's some analysis we could do for committee members, culturally specific, culturally responsive programs and practices and services, but how much systems level work we're doing around equity, that's like, what are policy shifts or changes? That's like, you might call the Student Success Act that was passed in the 2019-2021 legislative session, like an important policy with money behind it that said, so that's kind of like system responding to some changes. So I don't know, I'm just throwing out kind of what I'm hearing and trying to like put it into something that can help us move forward.
Brian, when I think about what you just were thinking through, I do see our grants as really being targeted universalism, and that we're looking for all youth to thrive. And the way that we fund a lot of culturally responsive programs are on culturally responsive, culturally sustaining strategies that really might meet the needs of specific populations. So I see that a lot in the work that we do. When I think about the systems work, like what are we doing on the systems level? I do think too, a lot of the work that Sanji was moving forward was really starting to do systems work, in addition to some of the other stuff that the rest of your staff is participating in and leading. But in addition to our community grants, the work in working with juvenile departments on what their strategies are, outlining equity, feels like a really important system strategy that, you know, it's a long game, but we're there.
This is great. Just looking at the time, I want to make a proposal here, just so we don't, spend time creating an equity statement now. Maybe that can be my homework for the next meeting, is to go back like we did with the purpose statements, create a couple examples of an equity statement, equity definition that we can present at the next meeting, and then you can all decide at that one. Does that sound reasonable?
I don't think this is just your homework, Jared. Please lean on others that, I want to work with you on this. And this is the work that I do every day. So I'd love to work with you on this. So lean on those of us that have, expertise in this area as well.
Great. Wonderful. All right. We'll reach out to you about that. Okay. And I want to leave 5 minutes for public comment if there are any. So we just had one more agenda item beforehand. Is there anything on this before we move on? Anything
Well,
else?
Jared, you may be about to say this. Sorry, Melissa. Did you want to jump in? Sorry, Melissa.
I haven't heard from our guest that they're planning or interested in making any public comment. So go ahead, Jared, with the next thing.
Oh, you go first, Brian.
Well, yeah, Andy, I just wanted to make any space if you had any thoughts about this or PV, and then I'll make one quick statement.
I think that we were talking about the racial thing. He was talking about being Black and then being Native American, the differences between everybody. But I'm about a 3 on this. I'm kind of like in the air, especially with our what we're trying to do, because we have tribal best practices, that we do all the time. So it's not different, but it's in the same motion of what we're trying to get done. So a little confusion yet. I'm still learning. So, looking back into this, I still got to look it up and see how we're doing as far as the 9 tribes is and what they're doing as far as their own tribes, their own communities. How is this, any different than what we're looking at right now? So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, because usually what I do on our meetings too, I kind of send it out and then they respond, and sometimes I don't get a response from every tribe, but like maybe 3 out of the or 4 out of the 9 tribes I do get responses out of. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like since we've been on this Zoom meeting, I know some of our representatives are a lot older and they hate Zoom right now, so yeah, it's hard for me to get a response out of them. So they're waiting for the in-person meetings more likely. So
yeah. So I'm hearing definitely more discussion on this equity statement. And
that's what I was gonna comment on, Jared. I think you just said it. Like, I think part of our charge is we have a purpose statement for the committee. It feels like we're in a good spot there. One of the charges in the strategic plan was to develop some kind of an equity statement. So I think that's the work that's just beginning now. And I think Jared may begin like asking this question about an equity lens, which maybe can come down the line, or whether it's called a lens or not. But this is important work, and I just appreciate y'all kind of working with us to wrestle with this, and feels like should be a continued conversation.
Absolutely, and it's hard work. This is a challenge. So thank you all for your inputs. Okay, and then just moving on, let me pull up. So speaking of the strategic plan, that is what we're going to discuss next. And just in the final couple minutes, just sort of go over what we will look at.
Jared, as we and as you start this process, just remember there is someone that would like to give a public comment. So let's leave some time for that if we can, please.
I will keep this to 2 minutes.
Thank you.
All right. So really, just wanted to review the strategic plan with you all. This was an attachment to the email that went out for the reminder in this email. Long document, but in preparation for this meeting, Bill and I went through this document, and we really looked everywhere where equity is mentioned and what we are charged with doing in the strategic plan in terms of equity. And just a couple main places that we wanted to point out, really, page 14. We've done some of this work already. So establishing an equity and disparity committee was part of the strategic plan, which we have done, obviously. And now we've got, oops, that's page 13. Page 14, we've got here, determine if a full equity, develop and implement a YDC equity lens decision-making tool. So that's really what we're thinking could be next steps potentially. And then the same thing down on page 19 here, we've got key strategic planning deliverables, equity lens, and equity/anti-racism statement. We're working on that, but it feels like the next logical step might be thinking about an equity lens in the future. So for next meeting and future meetings, if we want to just, on your own time, think about what that might look like and what an equity lens would mean for our division, what it would mean to implement it, what it would mean for grant making, for systems. So perhaps that could be a future conversation, and that's open to the group on whether that's something that we want to pursue next time or what we think there. But we've got 2 minutes. So with that, unless there's anything on that, I will turn it back over to Erica, and we've got public comment.
Thank you. Devi, would you like to go ahead and make your comment?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the time. I just really wanted to quickly say I'm from Deschutes County. I am the director of the Community Justice Department. And for a long time before that, I worked with the JCP program insofar as it related to juvenile department grants and that sort of thing. Identifying, eliminating, interrupting racial and ethnic disparity on our juvenile department is a high priority for us in both how we work and as an outcome. And I just wanted to express my support for the grant process that is continually increasing its requirement that all juvenile departments really do. If it's a lens, if it's a full approach, if it's an obligation, I'm really, really appreciating that. It's causing some really necessary conversations within the juvenile department system, if we're talking about systems. And I just wanted to say that I appreciated that. I love working with Anya, and we really appreciated working with Sanji. Sad to see her go. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you. I'm in Deschutes County as well, Devi. So thank you for that comment and your support. So now, if there's nothing else, do we have any other comments, questions, or thoughts before we adjourn?
Hey, Erica, this is Brian real quick. Just Devi, appreciate your input. And I'm just going to say it, these committees are open to other members. So Devi, if you want, keep coming to this committee. We'd even love to add you to the official roster as a member of the committee in order to be on the council. That's a whole process with the governor's office, blah, blah, blah. But Celeste is off. Bye, Celeste. But Devi, keep coming.
All right, thank you. So now I will adjourn and see you all later in the month for other meetings. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Erica. Thanks, Andy.